What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and I'm continuing the Superman saga. We've left the Reeve years behind. We've had the Reeve nostalgia with Brandon Routh, and now we're entering the new age, a new age of the DCEU. We're going to be doing Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and the Justice League Snyder Cut. And who better to join me on that than Comics in Motion, friend of the podcast, Max Byrne. How you doing?
Hey, Scott. I'm very well, thank you. It's great to be back on your show after a good while since the last time. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for taking these on. It's going to be interesting. This is a controversial little trilogy of
to say the least.
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to get into it and to see whether, does it start and build or does it just sink down? I don't know. It's going to be interesting sort of for those discussions. And beyond this, there is only one version of this, Man of Steel, that we're covering today. So we are doing the version of Man of Steel. Beyond that, we are going to be doing the ultimate version of Batman v Superman, so that it makes sense. And also we'll do the full Snyder Cut of Justice League, because, that's the full story, really. You want to do the full shebang on that one, to be perfectly honest.
You do. Absolutely, yeah. I have to book a day off work to get all these in.
I know. That's it. Watch it in episodes. It works like episodes, the Snyder Cut. And before we get into the Man of Steel, though, we've obviously done all the Superman stuff, and even we did the Super/Man documentary about Christopher Reeve and stuff, and so we've done all that sort of nostalgia. But what's your sort of connection and link and sort of relationship with Superman in the Superman movies? Were they, just some age to me, what was they sort of part of your childhood growing up? Is it sort of formative for you?
Oh, very much so, yeah. I mean, in terms of the character itself over the movie interpretation, it's just something that's always been there in my life. I remember, my earliest memories of being, 4 or 5. Do you remember in the 80s, the Kenner DC Superpowers figure range? Yeah. I had quite a few of those, and some of the Marvel Secret Wars as well. So I used to sort of reenact my own DC versus Marvel crossovers and things as a young boy. And it's just been a permanent fixture in my life for the 40 years since then, really. I've always had comics in the house when I was a kid. My mum used to go to, obviously growing up in the 80s in the northwest of England's comic book shops weren't very accessible, to say the very least. So she used to come back from flea markets and what have you with bags of DC comics, which is always annoying because they were always from the 70s and 80s. So you'd read one, really enjoy it, but then you'd never have the next issue to find out what happened next. So that was frustrating, to say the least. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of the films, I remember being a kid and we had the first one on video, Superman the movie, the first one, and some would say still the best. I think I would. It's all subjective, but to my mind, Reeve remains the golden standard, I think, for interpretation of the character. Obviously, we haven't seen what David Corrins will or won't bring to the party, so we'll find out in a matter of weeks as we record this. So I look forward to that. But yeah, certainly those films were always around as a kid, and I think we must have had Superman 2 as well, because I do remember watching that a lot as a kid. And like every child of the 80s, I remember being scared to my very soul by the sight of Cyborg Vera in Superman 3.
Yeah, it was a discussion point.
That's I think I defy any young child to watch that and not be petrified. And then, of course, you have the immortal Mark Pillow, Nuclear Man in Superman 4. What it's a film, I'll say that.
Yeah. Bless him. Bless him for trying. Yeah.
Well, he gave it his all, didn't he? So, yeah, I mean, those films have just always been around. And like any fan, you flock to the cinema whenever there's a new one released. So I'm sure we'll all be doing that in the middle of July when it comes out. So, yeah, interesting times ahead, we should say.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting how the character is sort of the swing of it. And I think we'll talk about it with Man of Steel and also sort of the follow ups. But as you say, so Christopher Reeve, the first one, I've gone through. I love the first one. I think the second one's good, but definitely the first one. And the third one, as you say, choices were made, decisions were, agreed upon. Apparently, yeah. And it takes a very odd and quite sort of horrific turn for a short time at the end. But and the fourth one, I always just love the picture of Mark Pillow in his Nuclear Man costume, like shaking hands with Princess Di. You're like, wow, you well done, fair play. Like,
I wonder what she actually thought. I wonder what's going through her mind at that point.
yeah. Did she actually watch the film, or was she just sort of like, I'm assuming that's a costume? Like, I'm hoping that's not what he thought was like the appropriate for this
Yeah.
event. But
I know, yeah. You would hope she would have met the cast after the movie
Yeah.
rather than before for a bit of context. Oh, she'd like, who the hell is this turkey here? But yeah, a very interesting time to say the
Yeah.
least. That Cannon film,
Yeah, good old Canon. But jumping forward to this, I mean, this was it 2006 for Superman Returns.
Yeah.
It didn't quite land and didn't get the follow-ups. And obviously following the success of Nolan's Batman trilogy, or at least the first sort of Batman Begins, obviously sort of Nolan becomes kind of involved in this, and you have David Goyer writing the script for this as well, and they bring Zack Snyder in to give us Man of Steel. I remember when this was coming out. Was it 2013? This came out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I'd already seen. I really liked his Dawn of the Dead.
Brilliant film. Yeah.
I think it's a legit good remake of that film. And 300 is a visual experience.
It is. It's literally puts the comic on the silver screen, doesn't it? Yeah.
And so it's one of those you go like, okay, he's got something. That there's early sort of like, I was never really a fan of Sucker Punch, but I love the visual sort of style of that as well. I think it came later, but I know he's got this visual style, so I'm like, all right, cool. What's he going to bring to it? So I was kind of excited when this came out. What were your thoughts? I mean, do you remember how was this when this was coming out? Because it was a big deal. I remember it being quite a big deal when it was being.
Yeah. Oh, it was huge, wasn't it? Because like you said, 2006 was the previous incarnation. So this is a 7-year gap, and obviously DC at that point hadn't. I think between though, obviously we'd had the Nolan trilogy, which obviously a roaring success, but they hadn't started to think about building a shared universe to sort of emulate the MCU. Obviously, a discussion for a later podcast, but they made a complete pig's ear of it, but that's by the by. But yeah, I remember being very, very excited and going to see this opening weekend with Sarah, my other half. I mean, like you said about Snyder as well, before he had DC form, because the other film he'd done prior to this was Watchmen, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah,
which,
that was
beloved DC. Yeah, beloved DC property. And say what you will about that film, but it is bloody faithful to the source material, apart from the end with the monster and the change.
Visually, yes.
Visually, yeah. I mean, so that's what I thought. We'll get these iconic Superman moments writ large on the big screen. Say what you will about Snyder and people, he's a very Marmite filmmaker.
Yeah.
But what he does do is have put interesting visuals on the screen, if nothing else.
Oh, absolutely.
That's something that can't be sort of, levied at him amongst certainly other things that can, which we'll get into. So yeah, I remember being very excited. I thought, finally, because as well, Superman Returns was it sort of fell under the weight of its own nostalgia, really, because it was trying to emulate the Donner films and act as a direct sequel to Superman 2, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And effectively ignore 3 and 4 and tried to glom on Superman 2 as an extension of that canon and be very sort of deferential to that film. And it very much like the first Superman movie, it wasn't what you'd call an action-packed film by any stretch of the imagination. There's no super adversary for Superman in that film, much like the first Reeve film. And the plot is very similar as well, trying to stop Luthor's dastardly plan to alter the landscape and all this.
Yeah.
So I thought at least here now we've moved on. Technology's also moved on as well to the point where we're actually finally going to get to see Superman do real super-powered, super speed fights with super villains, which is certainly what we did get in this film, for better or worse. So yeah, I remember being extremely excited prior to going to see it, for sure. Yeah.
It is a I like that you call him a Marmite filmmaker, and I think that's definitely the current position. But it wasn't really a position. I think you're right. I think I went into this very excited. Again, look, you know, I have my thoughts and feelings about his Watchmen, you know, but I went going like, yeah, as you say, this is going to be visually stunning. Like this is, like, you know, I like the phrase like, yeah, Superman images writ large. That idea of just sort of like, I'm going to see something special on this one.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, on that front, he doesn't disappoint.
Absolutely not.
I do think this film has got several scenes and everything that are just visually kind of like absolutely stunning and appealing and work fabulously. But there are other, as we said, we'll get into it. There are other things that I kind of, watching it more this time, I kind of noticed certain things that I was like, oh, that's an interesting choice. But before we get into it, let's just quickly we'll just release it. Everyone knows the cast, obviously. Henry Cavill as Clark Kent Superman, Amy Adams as Lois Lane, Michael Shannon as Zod, Kevin Costner as Pa Kent, and Diane Lane as Ma Kent, Lawrence Fishburne, and obviously Russell Crowe. So yeah, the cast. But as we go through the film, what this film kind of, you said about Superman Returns being incredibly close to the first film. This kind of does a similar thing where it's like, oh, it's going to be a very clear cut, like 3-act structure. You know, we're going to have the whole thing on. We're going to have the whole thing on Krypton, and which is interesting. Then we're going to have this sort of midsection of him looking for and trying to find who he is, and then the third act is versus Zod. I mean, it's almost like the first two films, like, you know, glommed together is sort of like, almost like the original, what Donna was kind of looking for.
Yeah.
So it works in that structurally. But what are your thoughts if we go to Krypton, you know, and we have this whole opening scene with Russell Crowe as Jor-El and everything there? What are your thoughts?
I think it works really well as a prologue. I mean, it's certainly unlike what you'd seen before, particularly Crowe's version of Jor-El, because he's as much a man of action as he is a man of science in this film. I mean, he's running around in the spandex himself, never mind Henry Cavill later in the film. You know, Crowe's diving off things in a spandex suit, and then when he eventually fights Zod one-on-one, he actually bests Zod, doesn't he? He puts Zod down. It's only through some shenanigans that he comes a cropper there. But I mean, there's a lot of world to see in that. I mean, you know, in the refilm, we kind of just saw inside that ice structure, and it's a lot of, you know, Brando obviously phoning in his performance, reading it off set.
Literally, yeah.
Reading it off the baby and what have you. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think he's still very good in it, Marlon Brando.
Yeah,
he may have took the money and run, but I do like his performance very much. But I think Crowe's really good. I mean, we get to see more. We get to see, you know, weird beasts sort of roaming around, including that weird dinosaur type creature he flies, and we see, you know, vehicles in the sky. We learn a bit more about what's going on in the situation. It's very good. I mean, I think the only thing that jars with me is the sort of mismatch of accents on Krypton. In this version, obviously in Superman the movie, even Brando's putting on a, you know, received pronunciation English accent, so they all tally up. But in this one, you've got Crowe with his Australian but trying to do a sort of
American,
you've got obviously Shannon with a full-on American accent, and then you've got Lara Eilert Zora, people know more now from playing Vanessa in Daredevil, of course, very good in that, and she's an Israeli actress, so her accent, you know, very much comes through as well. So it's like, well, where are they all supposed to be from here? Shouldn't it have been like a uniform accent? But I guess that's nitpicking. But it's certainly eventful, isn't it? That is an opening 15 minutes, roughly 15, 20 minutes at the start of the film. There's certainly a lot of going on, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it acts as a suitable prologue to, and it asks. Well, it covers two things. It's a suitable prologue. It's got some good world building, and it clears up motivations for Zod and stuff sort of for later on. But it's one of those weird ones where like it visually again striking. I love the some of the designs inside. I love this idea of like the metal. The sort of the metal bits when they do the phone call or the FaceTiming, but it's like a metal representation, which is again used throughout the film. It's a great look. It's a really cool idea. Oh, that's kind of a weird idea. This sort of flexing liquid physical metal thing. So I do love all the designs. But it does have some of my pet peeves of any of these sort of whenever I watch a sci-fi film, and I watch many for stories outside space. They'll put you on like, oh, we're going to this weird alien planet, and you go, cool. And then they have these like grand, rooms, like the room that the birth is done in the very beginning. It's when Lara's given birth. You kind of go, oh yeah, you've got the technology because it's all sort of the robots around. Massive room with just a bed in it. There's nothing else. And you're going like, this feels really kind of like, like what is the design? You go, okay, it's alien. They're going for weird. They're going for alien. But it's one of those that when you see the planet, it's very rocky. It's very barren. And again, I'm going like, I know they're harvesting the planet's core for energy. They explicitly say that. They bring about their own demise. I like that. But then I am going like, later on, Zod actually says to Superman, to Clark, I was raised as a warrior, and look where you get your skills, a farm. And he obviously doesn't really. I know it's a pun or a push, but I'm going like, okay, cool. How do you know about farms? And there must be farms on Krypton then. So where are they? Like, how do you get food? Yeah. Like, it's one of those things that once you sort of introduce these things, my mind starts to reel, and I'm like, cool. How does logistics work on this planet? Like, what's the hierarchy? And it's unfortunate that sort of my nitpicky brain goes to those things. So I'm like going, it's visually amazing, but now I've got a whole bunch of questions. But that's just me being very, very picky, I think. But
no, I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Howard, he's been on Earth for literally like less than a day at this point, hasn't he? Zod? When we're jumping ahead, obviously, but like you said during that final confrontation, so how would he know about those kind of things?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It covers a lot of ground in the time. You learn about this. Zod's trying to, do this military coup. Unlike it, and I like the way they paint Zod in this film in general, rather than Terrence Stamp's Zod. There was no shade of grey with him. He was a purely evil character.
Yeah.
But with Zod, there's a bit more. I mean, what he's doing is wrong, and he does many evil things in this film. Not least trying to do the genocide of the human race. But there's a method to his madness, isn't there? In what he wants to do. He's sort of a zealot, if you will, rather than pure evil. I mean, he is an evil
more
man,
than
but
that.
he's not.
Yeah. I think, like you say, because of the codex, which we learn about, like and they acknowledge that like everyone born on Krypton is not born of like natural birth. Like Clark or Kal-El is the first person to have been born of natural birth on Krypton for generations.
Yeah, centuries, he says.
Yeah. So Zod is actually a product of genetic engineering, and his sole purpose and his sort of drive is the protection of Krypton.
Yeah.
And, so even to the weird, when you sort of everything he does is that genetic driver. So you kind of get it. You're like, your methods aren't great, but you are being driven by a compulsion to do these things, and you have this justification. So yeah, I agree. Actually, he's better than the Terrence Stamp Zod. There's a camp fun that comes with Terrence Stamp's Zod, which I do greatly appreciate.
Yeah.
And Shannon has some of that. Like there's an archness to his Zod that I enjoy, but I do feel he's much more fleshed out in that way.
Yeah, he's a much more rounded movie villain in this than just pure pure pantomime, pure evil,
Yes.
pure, will conquer Earth for the sake of it. There's a reason he wants to conquer Earth. It's for obviously the rebirth of his own people, as opposed to just doing it because he's an evil bastard or whatever. So you get that. That's quite interesting. I mean, that whole thing with the codex and the birthing chamber that literally looks like something straight out of the Matrix as well, with all the babies being sort of built on these sides of towers and being plucked off when they're ready to be born.
Yeah.
But again, it's all that world building, isn't it? It establishes that these are how babies are made on Krypton, and everyone's fate is predetermined. I mean, when the AI Jor-El speaks to Clark later in the film, he says everyone's path is predetermined. You can be a warrior, you can be a worker, you can be a scientist, a leader, whatever it may be, but your path is predetermined from the moment you're born.
Yes.
Whereas what he and Lara were trying to do was create a child and conceive a child and birth a child naturally, and then that child is not pre-programmed to be anything, and they can forge their own destiny. It's an interesting prologue for sure. But yeah, I mean, it literally moves forward at a breakneck pace, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It never stops. I mean, you're literally opening the film with a woman literally giving birth. That's the first frame of the entire film. And from there, it's just perpetual forward motion up to the part where the planet just explodes. It's quite something, I think.
Oh, no, it's a brave choice. I mean, to sort of say as well, we're going to show you a Superman film, and you're not going to see Superman, and they're going to throw you into, like, the politics of this planet and all the world building and all this odd, like you said, the weirdness of it all. Like, you kind of just go with it, don't you? You go like, oh, I get it. As you said, like, the birthing chambers and all that sort of stuff. I think, again, cool ideas. I have like headcanon, you can sort of go like, yeah, they've obviously gone to like population control. They sort of allude to it, like population control and all those kinds of things. So that I like all that. I like the fact that you say it has these things of like there's actual sort of confrontation. It's not passive aggressive. The confrontation between Zod and Jor-El is good. It's a good, again, it looks good, good fight, and the fact that like Zod kills Jor-El and he doesn't even get to see his planet destroyed. He's killed before that happens, and Clark's been sent off with the Codex. So I think it just sets up all this stuff really, really well. It does lead to two of the weirdest kind of moments of the film.
I think I know what's coming, but I'll let you say it.
One of the first one is where the sort of I forgot one of the machines sort of says something to Lara, and sort of like she's like, it's a waste of time now, and you're like, yeah, but I'm always like, surely why is the computer? I think it tells her to sort of like, we should try and find shelter.
Yeah.
And like the planet is going to destroy itself, so it always feels a little silly, but I like the visual. But the other one, and you knew where this is going, is when Zod is captured and arrested, and him and his people are sort of taken in front of the council, and you get he's on trial and he's sort of arrested and stuff, and then he's sort of said, I will find him, and it's all good, very sort of threatening, very intimidating, and then he's turned into a giant dildo. For like, and I always forget about this, and when it happens, you're like, oh yeah, like.
Yeah, it's what a strange sort. Surely during the production design and the pre-conception, pre-visualization, somebody at Warner Brothers or DC or Snyder must have said, "That's a fucking like dildo shaped thing." And it's not just one. There's about a dozen of them because it's Zod
it's
and
crew.
Feora and the entire crew, of which is probably 10 or 12 strong, all simultaneously being encased in these phalluses and flown up into like the Phantom Zone generator.
But it's a
weird choice.
I do like this. As I said, I can imagine these conversations going on. Let's say they're doing the previs and someone's gone like, you may want to reduce the phallicness of these things. Like, it's not even it's not even like a mistake. It's not like, oh, they're encased and the body shape looks a bit like a penis. No, it's like they're all shaped the same, and they even like you can stop it and go, this looks very much like it's not even following the body contours. They just look like a penis. It's very weird. And yeah, for it to have gone through so many hands to get to a screen, and someone go like, no one go,
Yeah.
can we change this? Can somebody please just step in and
I
stop?
know this is a family film we're talking about
Yeah.
here. You know, it's such a weird thing to do. I mean, it's certainly memorable, isn't it? But I mean, what a really strange thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it's not even subtle. It's just that's what it is,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So you know, I'd love to sit down with people involved in the making of this film and go, what was the choice here? What was the motif
Yeah.
that you were going for here? It's really strange, but
were
whatever.
there any reactions when this was first screened internally? Like, you know, executives leaning forward, just going, "I've just got a note."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or like the test screenings that they do for all
Yeah.
a million test screenings where people mark it. Surely someone remarked on it, unless it was just sort of one big joke. I don't know, but
Maybe
it's a very, very weird choice.
someone was probably thinking at some point, though, like, "Oh, look, yeah," because obviously all these things have got to be toyetic. You've got to sell the toys.
Yes.
Oh, we can do the Zod prison set, and then they've seen it and gone, "We can't do the Zod prison set."
Yeah, that one's going in the bin, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's an idea. We're going to push past that idea.
It is, yeah. But yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah. Anyway, it jumps forward, obviously, and like Kal-El is blasted into space, and the planet explodes, and we do sort of then get this. The middle sequence of the film is this chopping and changing flashbacks and sort of like the current story, and then flashbacks to Clark's childhood as he goes about sort of saving people and going from place to place. His time in the wilderness, if you will, and then as it sort of recounts his sort of as he grows from a small boy in childhood through to adulthood. And this is a much longer section. We also meet Amy Adams, Lois. But I am. What are your thoughts on this section of Superman on sort of like on his travels, as you were, sort of traveling from place to place?
It's interesting that they do it in a non-linear way. It's the only Superman film to date that has done it in a non-linear fashion. There's a couple of flashbacks in Superman Returns, isn't there, where you remembering his childhood and what have you. But for the large part, they're all done in a straightforward narrative sequence. So for this to keep jumping back and forth and then jumping further back and then jumping a little bit further back, it's an interesting choice. I like it because we're not. If they did it all in sequence, you'd be waiting a bloody long time.
Yeah.
In the film for Henry Cavill to appear, let alone him to do anything Superman related. But literally, your very first section on Earth is this oil rig rescue scene, isn't it? Where you get to see a very small taste, albeit, but a taste of his superpowers and his invulnerability. It's a very cool scene, actually, and it just kind of shows it's that little taste of his urge to help others, and Superman's sort of unquenching thirst to do the right thing, where he literally holds this oil rig up with his bare hands to let the staff get off before it just all explodes.
Yeah.
But then literally as soon as that's over, you're flashing back to a scene of him, as a little boy in his classroom where his powers start manifesting, and hears everything, and he can see through his teacher's body with his X-ray vision. So it's all over the place, but it's easy to follow, isn't it? It's not something where you're going, oh God, where are we now? How old is he now? It's all done in a way that's, I think, it's easy to keep a grasp of.
Oh no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of this sort of version of Clark hasn't got his shit together yet. He's trying to find himself, and he's out in the world, as you say, trying to do things. And he's almost becoming like a legend. So there's almost like this sort of like, wherever he goes, sort of as Lois sort of finds out that like there are stories of this dude, and it's like, yeah, he just disappeared, but he helped me, like, so there's tales of him, and we'll get to how she sort of follows it backwards. But yeah, no, I agree. It does I think what I would say is, for this part, that I kind of like is how, although it chops and changes, like it almost is. They've tried to make it, for the most part, linked to whatever the scene is. So the scenes kind of move into each other as sort of like, oh, this has happened, and so he's having this memory of, like, oh, this is kind of like what would be the source of this, thought piece, or like. So, like, you know, what you say, when he's introduced, and we introduced to him and his powers, and he's sort of on fire, and, you know, his big manly chest is holding up the tower and stuff, and you go, oh, that's impressive. And then it goes back to him as a kid, and he's sort of like, he's panicking, and like, I can see through people, I can hear everything, and all this other stuff. Like, I like the balance that they are trying to show, like, you know, no, he didn't just become, you know, Superman and start doing this stuff. Like, he has had to sort of go through those stages, and when he was a kid, it was terrifying to sort of look at and see people's bones and flesh and muscle and organs and all kinds of stuff. So it's you know, I think, as you said, the effects. I think the effects still stand up. You know, they look really good. So I like that balance that tries to strive for, and it also gives that link of relationship between, especially between him and his mother. So between sort of Clark and Martha Kent, you definitely get more of that sort of, like, you know, an understanding of how she's nurtured him through some of this stuff. The problem is, I think, the other side, as he sort of, you know, is it also introduces Jonathan Kent, Kevin Costner's Jonathan Kent, who is one of these controversial parts. And I really came into it today because I was like, the two versions of Jonathan Kent have affected me the most, where his death has been involved, is the first film and All-Star Superman, which kind of follows a similar tact of being like, Clark can't save everybody, and a heart attack or something is something that sort of, like, you know, it's just not possible. Like, you know, his powers don't allow him to save that person.
Yeah, of course.
But like Jonathan in this, you know, you always have the sort of the mentoring Jonathan, the sort of, like, you know, you're meant for better things, and, you know, you've got to grow into your powers, and I'm proud of you, and all this other stuff. In this one, it's kind of like fear mongering. Don't, because they're going to try and cut you up and all this other shit. I don't know, it feels so sort of incongruous to, like, what I think the messages they're trying to get across, but both the performance and the dialogue sort of go a different way, and it feels really odd. I don't know if what are your thoughts?
I mean, I like Costner in the film. I think, you know, I think he's a good, you know, Costner's a great screen presence in most things he's in. He is a good actor, Kevin Costner. There's no two ways about it. I think he's very good, and I think they were obviously going for like a strong Jonathan Kent. Like Costner's always portrayed as like a rugged man, isn't he? A, you know, a macho kind of character actor, isn't he? Those are the kind of parts he plays. And that's the kind of Jonathan Kent they've gone for. He's not quite as old, maybe, as the Reeve version and the version we're going to get in the new film. They've pitched them at sort of late middle age as opposed to old age. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when they try and age Diane Lane up later, they just grey her hair up, really, and go, yeah, she's 20 years older now, even though she looks exactly the same. But there you go. And we'll get on to how they might try and make Cavill look young as well. But yeah, I mean, I think he's good in it. I think he plays it really well. I just think, like you said, some of the writing is a bit strange, because Jonathan Kent is the man that gives Superman his moral compass.
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
When Clark Kent, Kal-El, if you will, he's Kal-El when he lands, he's Clark Kent because he's found by the Kents. When he lands on Earth, in effect, he's like a blank slate, isn't he? You know, it's like nature versus nurture question. If he'd been taken in by a family of complete wrong-uns, then would he have grown up to be an evil Superman? Would he not have been imbued with the values that he was given by the Kents? So Jonathan Kent is the man that gives him. He's his father on Earth, so he's the man who gives him, you know, his morality, his humanity. But this is a Jonathan Kent that is so. I get it comes from a place of love, because he just wants to protect his son at all costs. But when he gets slightly angry with the teenage Clark, who saves all his classmates from drowning horrifically on the school bus, after the school bus goes off a bridge into a lake or a pond, whatever it may be, and it's sinking and they're all going to drown. And then obviously Clark, because he's Clark, can use his powers and lifts the truck, the bus rather, onto the bank, and everyone's safe. But the kids see him do it, and obviously then Pete Ross and his mother come round, and his mother is a bit ungrateful, I must say, as well. You know,
I'm really confused by that scene, but yeah.
Is she like damning Clark, or is she like, oh, praise the Lord, it's happy day out? It's like a bit of both, isn't it?
Well, it's that thing again where the dialogue and the performance don't
Yeah.
quite match, because she's saying like, no, this is, like she says it like a providence from God, but the way she's saying it is almost like she's actually saying it's providence from God, but what I'm hearing is he's a demon, and you're going,
Yeah.
sorry, this is really mismatching, like,
Yeah.
kind of what's happening. So yeah, but it's I kind of that's how I feel about Jonathan Kent.
Yeah. But he's angry with Clark for saving those kids, and Clark says, "Well, what the hell was I supposed to do? Just let them die?" And he goes, "Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe," because he's he's willing to let everyone else die, including himself,
Yeah.
in his death scene, in order to protect his son. He literally allows himself to die in order to protect his son, which is it's a strange choice. His demise. I go back and forth on it. What do you think?
No, is it you said about, like, he gets his humanity or his morals, it's clearly it's supposed to be this father-son relationship, because
Yeah.
there's a film about the two fathers. Is the Earth Father and the Krypton Father, and they offer different things. Like, Jor-El is this sort of like methodical and kind of scientific and distant. He's of the past. And Jonathan Kent was supposed to be there. He raised him, he loved him, he cared for him, and all this other stuff. So I get the notion of wanting to protect him and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it constantly comes across like almost like paranoia. Like, no, you can't be found out. But there's part of me going like, dude lifted a bus out of a pond. Like, if he gets found out, like, I'm not entirely sure there's going to be much issue. Like, I don't know what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, I think he thinks the Men in Black are going to come and take him away, doesn't
Well,
he?
exactly. It feels very like that sort of almost conspiratorial, that sort of paranoia. But the scene with his death, with the tornado, he's meant to be 19, isn't he? This is meant to be a sort of 19-year-old Clark.
It's a 30-year-old Henry Cavill trying to look like a teenager, where they just brushed his hair a bit differently, like Bale in Batman Begins, when they may try and make him look younger. Yeah,
my favourite thing that they do for this. They give them slightly baggier clothes and they'll brush their hair different. And you're like, yeah.
Yeah, he's a teenager. Yeah, what of it?
It's just, it feels like it's like Steve Buscemi turning up with his cap on backwards, carrying a skateboard. I mean, it's so sort of weirdly off-putting, but yeah. I don't know. It's this thing of the way they've done it as well, because he calls out Jonathan Kent, says, "You're not right." It even has that kind of like, "You're not my real dad," and you're kind of like, "Oh, that feels cliched." But the whole thing of him sort of like just saying stop, he gets his foot stuck and the tornadoes come, and Jonathan Kent's just saves someone. Or does he save the dog, actually?
But he goes back for the dog. That's the reason he goes back, is because the dog's still in the car. Yeah.
So he saved the dog. He gets trapped and then says no and lets the tornado take him. And I don't know, it just feels kind of... The fact that Clark stops and lets it happen...
That's what I struggle with, yeah.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, you should have gone, no, I can do this. Because then whatever happens is, I'm pretty sure that, because everyone was so scared and so wound up, that you'd be like, yeah, it was crazy. We got thrown all this distance. You hear legit, real stories of people being sort of like flung great distances by tornadoes and surviving with almost with almost barely a scratch. It kind of feels like you could have justified it and saved him and not had to worry about it. Like it just feels so weirdly contrived to have this scene, but the scene doesn't carry the weight that I think both Goya and Snyder thought it did.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I get what Jonathan Kent's doing there. Again, he's just protecting his son at all costs. He's willing to, end his own life to save his son. I get that, but like you said, I refuse to believe. I know he's trying to obey his father here, but there's no way you would let your own father perish in that way.
No,
you could have super speeded over to him and got him, and just like you said, could have just held on to him because at this point he doesn't know he's not tapped into his flights and all the rest of it. But he could have got over there. He could have just grabbed onto him and let the tornado take them. And like you said, they could have just hidden under something till it passed and gone, oh, what a miracle, we managed to grab onto something and here we are, fantastic. There's just no way that he would let that do. I think, you're supposed to think he's done that and then he's carrying that burden for the rest of his adult life, and it's it's this thing he's carrying, and then he's later on when Zod demands, he gives himself up, and that's weighing heavily on his mind, what his father wanted him to do, and giving himself up to Zod means revealing himself to the world, which his father didn't want him to do. So I get what they're going for, I really do, but I think the problem's in the execution.
I agree.
I get what they're trying to do, but they just don't achieve it in a way. There's two really not debatable, but really like contentious, much discussed deaths in this film. This one and one at the end.
Yes.
I just think I don't think that would have happened. They should have gone down. I suppose they didn't want to repeat themselves of having him have a heart attack and have all that, because it's been done, hasn't it? But
which
if they're going to kill him off, they should have come up with something. I don't know what.
Well, it needs, if you're going to do it this way, it needs something to follow up on it, because it then obviously cuts back to the, as you said, the sort of like the present storyline and going back and forth in the flashbacks.
Yeah.
And seeing sort of like young Clark letting his dad die in this tornado. The one thing we never get is a funeral. And in the original, in the Superman the movie, you get the thing where he's not there to save his dad because of the heart attack, and they have the funeral scene where he says like, I wasn't able to save him, and Martha sort of says like, yeah, but you this isn't on you, kind of thing. Like, you didn't hold this. In this scene, I can imagine like you almost need to have the scene of like Martha Kent sort of having to acknowledge, look, he made that choice. This is not on you. He made that. You were just honoring your father. This is not on you. I don't blame you. I think, because it feels kind of like happens and then they cut away and it, so yeah, it's an odd choice again. This idea as well though of not revealing yourself to the world. The whole sort of concept of the first film is very much about when you're ready. You are going to have to reveal. Like Jonathan Kent even says in the first film, like you're sort of going to have to reveal yourself at some point. Like when you're ready and when the world is ready in the right way. And then sort of Jor-El, as in like Marlon Brando's Jor-El, sort of echoes that and takes it further and says like, I sent you my only son into the. Oh, he gets very biblical, but basically it's sort of like, there are good people. They just need guidance, and you will become, you will show them to sort of like walk in the light kind of thing. Oh, cool. So he's meant to be this idea of hope and positivity, and these, he can do these great things. In this one, it's kind of like, shh, don't tell anyone.
It doesn't get to that stage until he meets his AI father, where that AI Jor-El does echo some of those points about. He says, they'll join you in the light, and you can save them all, and you can be the bridge between these two worlds that your mother and I always wanted you to be. But again, that makes no sense, because at the start of the film, after he's born, he's literally sent away not long after that, and he says, Lara, have you found a planet for him? And she's like, yeah, this one. So how can they have always wanted him to be that bridge between the two worlds? Because that's a lot of bollocks. But it's just tonally it doesn't quite mesh, does it? The two parts.
No, it's ideas, but it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Fortuitously though, whilst on his wilderness ramblings, he happens to work in a bar and overhears about something being found in the Canadian North. Very lucky they'd heard about it. And after destroying a man's livelihood,
what do you think of that? It seems very, very petty thing to do, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And like I said, because he's still young, he is still it's a human response, isn't it? It's that thing of I always kind of let this go because I'm like, yeah, that feels like a kind of human response where I'm like, fuck you, I'm gonna, I'm gonna mess up your truck. I'm not just gonna stab your tires. I'm gonna stab your entire truck with a tree.
I suppose in a way it's no different to at the end of Superman 2, where he makes a point of going back to that diner and teaching that guy a lesson who'd beat the snot out of him when he had no powers at the at the midpoint of the film. So people go, oh, that's not Superman. Superman would never do such a thing as to that. But then you think, well, would he have done that at the end of Superman 2, which people revere as,
Yeah, exactly.
what's the massive difference there? There isn't one.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, I think the guy had it coming anyway, but I mean, it does seem like a little bit of an extreme reaction. But I do agree with you. I think it's a human reaction. Yeah,
It is, yeah, exactly, and I'm fine with that. I think it's quite a big reaction, but like it's and it's funny and it looks good. But yeah, he's able to then sneak into an army camp and with a uniform and able to get on board this ship, which they're looking at and saying it's like 300 meters long. It's been in the ice. It's sort of like the ice around it is almost 20,000 years old, and they suspect it may have been a Russian submarine or this other stuff they're speculating. But Clark manages to get on board, and you get this ship, and we get like the face, the little robots, the floating robots again, and obviously Lois Lane gets on board as well. But as he walks around, it kind of sends like. Again, this is one of those science fiction things that sort of I nitpick at. Right, it's been there for 20,000 years.
yeah,
All right, that's a long time. 18,000, I think they say at the end. Right,
yeah.
that's a long time. It's still an advanced spaceship. Does that mean that Krypton's reached a point of technological advancement and went, "Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
We're not going to do anymore"? I can guarantee you. Could you put a USB plug into something from? Well, humans weren't even really doing a great deal 18,000 years ago. I'm not entirely sure how, this thing of things being like, how long was he in space for then? How long has Krypton been destroyed for? Like, what? It's just what I see this a lot with we found this ancient ship, and you go, cool, it still works, and you go, no, it wouldn't. Like,
No.
this is ridiculous.
There's a lot of unanswered questions there. I mean, one of the pods is even open. You see these desiccated Kryptonian corpses, but one's open, and that's never expanded upon as to what happened to that person.
Well, you know
Or
what?
is it?
Well, no, it's not. But
No.
it's what Snyder wanted to do, and I'm so glad he kind of didn't do this, because the suggestion was that the Amazons, as in Wonder Woman and that, were actually descended from Kryptonians, and so there was going to be a link to whoever had been escaped from that pod 18,000 years ago had then started the line of people that would have become the Amazons. And yeah, exactly, it's a terrible idea. It doesn't work. It's an awful idea.
Yeah. No, I'm glad they nixed that in the bud and actually made the Amazons actual Amazonians like they did. But yeah, it's an interesting choice, because the ship then becomes the Fortress of Solitude, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As opposed to an actual fortress.
Mm-hmm.
So which you don't really get, because after that initial time he spends where Jor-El does the Kryptonian history lesson, the ship then is commandeered by Zod, and then by the sequel it's a government lab in the center of Metropolis, isn't it? So he never gets that moment again. So it's a very fleeting moment he gets, and it's a shame really, because I think that's one of the key ingredients for Superman is the Fortress of Solitude, and to have it presented this way is fine. Making it a ship is a more realistic thing than some palace crystals shooting out of the ice. That's this is a more contemporary version of Superman where they're trying to make it more real world.
Well, it's a sci-fi. It's a science fiction version. They're going for harder sci-fi really, which is cool. I'm happy with that. It's fine.
Yeah, they're trying to make it more practical, aren't they?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a ridiculous concept when you think about it. Obviously, God, aliens with godlike powers and all the rest of it. Of course, it's incredibly high concept, but they're trying to ground this whole film. They're trying with varying degrees of success to ground it in reality, aren't they?
Yeah, but and I'm kind of fine with it. But the thing is with this, it opens up as you say, kind of questions that I have that aren't answered. And again, only really, I hadn't watched this for a couple of years, so when I was watching it this time, I was really sort of like, I'm trying to follow along to make sure I don't miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that the S on Superman's chest, and this has sort of become kind of typical of modern lore, is that it's now the crest of the House of El.
Yeah.
So that is the House of El, and you see later on when Zod removes his armor and he's down to he's got his own family crest on his chest as well. He's got like a I don't know what the Zod's, because he's just Zod. I don't know if he's like Zod Smith or whatever, but like he has his own
House
family
of
crest.
Zod, yeah.
House of Zod.
It looks very much like a Russian sickle as well, doesn't it?
I noticed that. It's kind of
Is that supposed to be deliberate? I don't know.
I don't know, but it's I like that it's very different though. That it's not like they haven't quite done another letter. It's very different. But when, as you said, when he goes into the ship and he plugs in and it's got the S on it, he was given that. It's his family's emblem.
Yep.
Fine. Fits into the sort of the key thing, and you get Jor-El giving him that history lesson, and you get the cool metal looking stuff going on. And he talks about them.
Yeah.
It looks great, doesn't it? Like, and it goes off into. It talks about the expansion into space and how they were sort of looking for resources and outposts. He talks about, and it talks about Zod and the coup. But one thing I noticed, the flag that gets sort of stamped down as for the outpost has got the House of El crest on it.
Right.
And then then two of the other, when you see the front of two of the other astronauts, they've got the House of El crest on them as well. So I don't know whether like Jor-El's like, yeah, we were badass. So the House of El, clearly very important. Oh, cool. But that's really only because Jor-El's telling you this history. Because his consciousness is in that stick. That's the key point. Okay, cool. Why then does this ship that crashed 18,000 years ago just happen to have a suit in it, a ceremonial suit, with the House of El crest on the front?
Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting one, isn't it? Unless it made it for him, unless it was like made it in a bespoke fashion, like instantaneously using technology or something.
Like the Star Trek, makes the food. I can't remember what it's called now. But
that kind of thing. Unless it was that, but yeah, I completely understand what you mean. And another thing as well, if this ship crashed 18,000 years ago, however long it was, why did no other Kryptonians come back to Earth? Because on Earth, Kryptonians have literal godlike powers. So why did no one think in the 18,000 years since then, we have a really good life if we go to this planet. Why don't we send more? Because you learn they was going out to all different kinds of planets. And when Zod's telling his backstory as to what's happened to him in the years between the start of the film and him arriving on Earth, and it shows them going to different planets as well and finding, he says, we looked for the old colonial outposts, but everyone was dead there. Well, first of all, how did they die? Because they weren't affected by Krypton's demise, because they weren't on Krypton. But why did no one come back to Earth? And why would they die in their pods as well? Because if they were on Earth, they would all of a sudden be imbued with these amazing powers. So they wouldn't be trapped in a pod. That does really make sense. So there's a few things that don't quite stack up, isn't there?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as I sort of went through the ship. I was like, this doesn't add up. Like, it doesn't quite work. Which I do want to. I'm going to jump ahead actually to a point, because you've made the point, and I want to sort of, when we get to Zod's plan with the planet.
The world engine,
like the planet terraforming. I'm going to ask the question now, and we'll come back to it, because you're right. We've seen the effect, obviously, that living on Earth has on Clark. He's super strong. He can fly. He's got laser eyes. Almost invulnerable. We see how quickly they adapt to this, both through Furia and Shannon's Zod at the end,
Mm.
like how quickly they can adapt. Like this isn't like years of evolution. Within 15 minutes, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm badass. I can fly and I can do all this other stuff." Like, cool. Why does he want to then terraform the planet to be like Krypton? It's like, oh look, I can fly and do this amazing stuff, but I want to return this planet to the conditions that take all that away from me.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, but then would it, because their powers come from the sun, don't they? As opposed to, it's not.
That is part of it. Yeah,
His powers are not from Earth itself; they're from Earth's yellow sun,
that's
as
true.
opposed to Krypton. So unless he terraformed the sun as well into a red one, I suppose they would still have them. But I get what you mean. Why do it? I suppose again it harks back to his sort of predetermination of his when he was created, his sole purpose. I think he even says, "My sole purpose is the preservation of Krypton and its people, and I'm willing to commit genocide on Earth to do it."
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you mean. Why do it? Why do it?
But
And
also,
then make everybody the same as well. Even if
Yeah.
powers are still intact, everyone else has the same. You will literally, the one thing that makes you above literally everyone else on this planet, that makes you a literal god, will no longer be a factor, because they'll all be dead and the rest of the planet will be people just like you. So you will no longer be, yes, you'll be
top of the
General
tree.
Zod, yeah, but there'll be people who can match you, like this boy who's lived on a farm. So yeah, there's again some logic flaws there, isn't there?
Well, again, if it was me, and I think what's interesting is that this kind of thing has been addressed in later things. If you've ever watched Invisible or read Invisible, the thing of like the Viltrumites, when they'll come and sort of go like, no, we're not just about killing everyone. It's about subjugation. Like, we're going to come and kill enough people so that you're terrified of us, and then we become your overlords. Like, that feels much more like, you go, yeah, that's what I would do, because then you got a lower class of workers and all this other stuff. So yeah. But we'll get back to that sort of his zealotry and stuff later on. But you do get before that, as you say, when he's been in the sort of the Fortress of Solitude in the ship, and he's now given his ceremonial suit. They try to mimic the beats of the Superman the movie, and one of the things I've sort of said when I talked about it with Mike, who'd never seen him before, like it was his first time sort of watching this. That moment when Christopher Reeve's Superman steps out of the Fortress of Solitude, and you have the John Williams score playing. It's just sort of like goosebump inducing. Like it's fun. It's so iconic, and it's so sort of full of all the that emotion and stuff that comes with it. And they kind of try to replicate it here, but in replicating it, you kind of recognize that it's not as good as. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. They have obviously him stepping out onto the ice. They're literally the first time in the film you've seen him in the full Superman costume from head to toe. It's the first time you're seeing this, and Jor-El's voiceover, isn't it? And it's very similar to Brando's about how you can be a leader of these people. They'll join you in the light. If you show them the way, you can do anything, save everyone. Keep pushing your limits on, and then obviously he taps into this hitherto undiscovered power of flight. But yeah, it does feel like a facsimile of that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think it suffers only by comparison. I think watching it by itself, I think it's very good.
It is.
I mean, the music's pretty good. I do like Hans Zimmer's score throughout this film. I think it's very good. I mean, I think a lot of people think you can't make a Superman film without the John Williams score, and I go both ways on that. And I think it's fair to say we'll get some of that in Gunn's yet to be released film. I think even the trailer had a little hint of it. But I think there's nothing wrong with forging your own path, and I think Zimmer's music's really good in this film.
I agree. I think the Superman theme is iconic, but fair play to him. I think the score on this is actually really good, and also it fits better with what it is that they're trying to present. I think Zimmer's score feels into that sort of more grounded science fiction approach. I think sort of works for what they're doing. And you're right, it only sort of is lesser in comparison to the Superman the movie. However, I would say I love the fact that he doesn't just take off. You know, I like the fact he sort of, I can jump first, and then he sort of pushes and gets higher, and then it kind of like goes a bit pear-shaped, and he falls down to earth and crashes through a mountain, and then he's able to fly. So I like the fact that it's a bit of an escalation. Like if he came out and was just able to fly, I'd probably be fine with it, but I actually really like this, that it starts with the jump. I mean, that goes back to the origins of the comic. Like, you know, can leap a tall building and all that kind of stuff. It feels that like that evolution. So no, I appreciate that, and it's good stuff. And then the flying scene is joyous. I think the flying scene in this, when he's finally learnt to fly, is, you know, I think is one of my favourite parts of the film.
Yeah, me too. I think it's it's a film overall that's very, in terms of humor, there's barely any in this film, and there's very little. You just hit the nail on the head saying it's joyous. There's very little joy in this film as well, for better or for worse. But that scene, the beaming smile that he has, as you would. I mean, Christ, if you just discovered you can fly, anyone would be like, "Oh my God, this is literally the most amazing day of my entire life." You know, it'll never get better than this. And to see the beaming smile on his face as he literally traverses the globe. He literally takes off in the Arctic, and the next shot he's going like over like the plains of Africa or wherever it may be. And then I think there's one shot where he goes over the White Cliffs of Dover, it looks like, or something like this. So, you know, and then shoots into the atmosphere, and it shows him, you know, going round the curvature of the Earth. So again, it highlights how fast he can fly and all the rest of it. That's really cool. But there's just when he finally takes off and that music swells up, the piece of music, I think it's called Flight or First Flight or something like that on the soundtrack. I think that works really well. It's just a shame, like you said, that they made it a little bit close to what I'd done before. But I think if you hadn't seen that and you watch this in isolation or can put that out of your mind, I think it's a really good scene. I think it's one of the highlights of the film.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Like you said, I agree that sort of the smile he has as he's doing it is the moment of joy in this film. As you're right, it's kind of like there's not a great deal. It's not, you know, they want to keep it quite gritty and sort of serious in most places. So yeah, I do like the fact that, like, hell, if I could find out I could do this, like, yeah, you'd be laughing and barrel rolling and all kinds of stuff. Like, it'd be brilliant. So yeah, so I appreciate this. I think it's a good scene. Now, you're right. The swelling of the music is where the score really sort of pays off. Yeah, and it is a real success. But in the meantime, while this is going on, we should highlight Amy Adams' Lois Lane has been following all these kinds of stories and building up what I assume somewhere is a wall with red like string all over it, connecting all these stories like some crazy sort of like serial killer. But like she's managed to piece together all these sort of random stories that then brings her to Pete Ross in Smallville. You know, fine. She's an investigative journalist. I'm gonna buy it. It's fine. I've bought into lesser things in other films. Shows how good she is. It's one of those things. I love it in films though when you do sort of like, and at least Perry White, Lawrence Fishburne's Perry White calls her out like, "Where the hell have you been?" Because like she's been traveling a lot, and I'm assuming she's putting this on like the company credit card.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you know, surely you would have to report in to your editor. It's like, this is where I'm going, and this is why I'm doing it, and this is what I hope to lead it to. I mean, yeah, I can buy her managing to piece all that together. I go a bit up and down on Amy Adams herself as Lois Lane. I mean, Amy Adams, a fine actress, you know, undeniable. She's been I thought she was fantastic in The Fighter. I really liked her in that, and I liked her in
Arrival.
Right, that was the one, the alien one. Yeah, Arrival, very good. American Hustle, great film. But I don't know if I ever really. Again, she's nothing wrong with the performance per se, but Amy Adams, her Lois Lane is she's quite softly spoken in this film. Do you know what I mean? And that's not how I see. Again, it's my opinion means no more than anyone else's. It's all interpretation. But I don't know. I don't quite get that kind of brassiness, that boldness. She has quite a meek quality. I mean, again, she's quite fearless. She gets involved. She's on the Kryptonian ship, and she's, you know, on that almost suicide mission at the end as well, that she fortuitously escapes by falling out of the ship. But obviously she hadn't done. She'd have been sucked into the Phantom Zone with everyone else. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think about it?
No, I actually agree. It's funny you say it, because Margot Kidder and like Terry Hatcher are really my sort of go-to live action Lois Lanes.
Yeah.
And there's kind of like there is that sort of bravery, sort of like, you know, but it's more than that. It's kind of like there's a bolshiness. They've got like, you know, big pair of brass balls going on as Lois Lane.
Yeah,
like, you know,
yeah.
it's not that she's brave. Like, she will actively seek out problems or the trouble because that's where the story is.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, it's that kind of like they've grounded her a little bit. They've tried to make her sort of probably a bit more realistic, but in doing so, she feels a bit tame, I think, is that sort of thing. And yeah, so I think I like Amy Adams. I think she's doing a lot of good things, but yeah. She feels like an odd choice in this. Like, she doesn't feel like she's got the, I don't know, like you kind of this is one of those weird things I find with this Lois Lane. I don't feel would be attracted to Superman. It's just going to sound weird, in that, like, the thing that attracts sort of like the more sort of like ballsy sort of Lois Lane is that kind of almost like the thrill of it, of like, you know, who he is. He's sort of like, you know, it's he's into the action. This is Superman. He's at the heart of things. He's doing this stuff. Like, she wants to be a part of that. Like, you know, like, there's a reason that Lois Lane becomes Superwoman. You know, she'd be like, of course I'm going to take the serum that's going to make me Superwoman for however long. Like, absolutely. This is the sort of Lois Lane that would be like, well, you know, is that the right thing to do? And you know, they tried to make her ballsy, but it never feels legit.
Yeah. I think she's a lot better than Lois Lane and Kate Bosworth was in Superman Returns. I think she was terribly miscast. Just looked far too young, and
she was 23.
That's far too young to be Lois Lane at this point of her life. Anyway.
And to have a 5-year-old son, which kind of doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, it was
exactly.
Really
she should be 30 something.
Yeah, exactly.
As I guess Amy Adams must have been at this time of her life. That's the optimum age for Lois Lane, I think. 30 something, mid 30s, even late 30s. That's fine. But Bosworth. That's a whole other discussion. That, but there's nothing wrong with Amy Adams in this. Like I said, I think she's a fabulous actress, but I just think she doesn't quite have that Lois Lane personality to her, if that makes sense. You know, it sounds harsh, but that's the way I feel. You know, when she's going round, like you said, she's on this Odyssey piece and going back. Taking back steps through that we've seen Clark's journey throughout the film. She goes to speak to the barmaid, doesn't she? She goes to speak to the guys who were on the fishing boat that he was on when he jumps off it and goes and saves the guys on the Orig. I think she goes and speaks to one of the Orig workers, etc., etc., etc. But for all that, and then the other bit when she's first gets to the army base and she's speaking with the military and that, you know, Lois Lane is a military army brat. Her father was General Sam Lane, you know, a legend of the military. So she's grown up around that kind of thing. So again, you'd expect her to be more like bolshy and just like uber confident. I mean, she doesn't lack confidence, but she just still has that very softly spoken way of speaking. It just doesn't quite work for me. But again, I think I'm being harsh.
Yeah, no, I think, like I say, she's sort of fine as an actress, but it never feels like Lois Lane, isn't it? She never sort of nails the essence of the character that we'd expect. I think the thing is, I think others do in the sort of like, you know, I think like Lawrence Fishburne, I like as sort of Perry White. I think, you know,
he's great,
yeah, and you know, Lawrence Fishburne is great. He's just one of those actors. He's sort of like a bit of an older statesman now, and I like what he does. And I think he works as Perry White in this, calling her out, and sort of like, he has that gravitas.
Yeah, he's got that charisma, hasn't he?
Yeah. So that all sort of works. And I think the sort of the whole army bit kind of works as well. When sort of Zod comes onto the TV and starts saying sort of like, there's one among you, and all that sort of stuff. Again, I think there's sort of like decisions and things that are made here, presentation that works really well, because like it goes around the world, and it's not just Zod speaking in English. Like it's been translated and it's been presented in sort of like French, in Chinese, and all these other things. So it's I like the fact that they've realised that, like, he's going through these networks and it's being translated through whatever Kryptonian technology exists.
Yeah, it's like something out the Outer Limits, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like the opening credits of the Outer Limits. It's really cool. Yeah,
it's a great visual. Yeah, because it's not just Zod stood there, like it's all warped and it's fuzzy and it's all that stuff. Yeah, I think it looks cool. It looks really good. And obviously leads Clark to try and make this decision, and he goes to the church. And there's a lot of Christ. We're going to sort of like say this is where the sort of like he's been in the wilderness. He's coming up to 32. Like at some point he's going to make a crucifixion position above Earth.
He does, yeah.
And
God, where Jor-El sends him. Yeah. So it's literally God on high sending his only begotten to save us.
Yeah. And he makes the decision in a church with the light shining on him. It kind of all feels very sort of like, they've gone, right, we're going to go for the Christ metaphors as strongly as possible for the next sort of 40 minutes. But yeah, fine. But when he does reveal himself and he sort of turns up in the desert and he sort of, he's sort of hanging there in the air, and the cape's all flapping and stuff, and that he does look good. I think, Cavill, he's had a shave, they've cleaned him all up, and they've done his hair a bit different and stuff. He looks, when he's in the suit, like he looks the business.
He looks like Superman, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Say what you will about Cavill, and we'll talk about Cavill's performance and his general acting, but he looks like Superman, doesn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ripped from the comic book.
Physically perfect.
Yes.
For the character, I mean.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like, he's got the right look, the right stature, the right sort of chiseled jaw. Like, he is ripped from the comic book. I'd like it to be a bit brighter, but ripped from the comic book. So it looks cool. And I think it's interesting they try to have this kind of thing of, again, the gentleness with the power. So when he gets taken in and he puts on the handcuffs and he sits in the sort of detention room and then is able to use his X-ray vision to see all the people and what they've got in their pockets and stuff and all that kind of thing. And then again, just the way that it presents the special effects, there's no pulling. When he breaks the handcuffs when he stands up, there's no like having to yank to pull to break the handcuffs. He just kind of like just drops his hands and they kind of just break.
There's nothing to him, yeah.
No, exactly. Like it's a real show of power. The way they've done it, I'm like, oh, they've kind of got the strength right. That's kind of cool. And there's this whole thing. Oh, interesting. We've talked about the crest, the S.
Yeah.
And he sort of says, well, where I come from, it's it means hope.
Yeah.
And Lois Lane's like, oh, where we come from, it's an S. Again, little bits of humor like that, a welcome, I think. But now he's out there, let's talk about Cavill and his performance and this transition from sort of Clark to Superman. What are your thoughts on him as a sort of his performance in this?
I think he's fine. I think, like we said, physically, 10 out of 10 in terms of suitability for the role. He looks like Superman. He's got the right look, handsome guy, absolutely jacked to the gills.
Yeah.
He looks and sounds like Superman. His American accent's absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that. I think with Cavill in general, I don't think he's a great dramatic actor, though. I've never watched anything with him in, and I'm probably being ignorant. There's probably stuff out there that I haven't seen, but the films I've always seen him in, you always think, well, there's nothing wrong with his performance, but he doesn't appear to be an actor with a great amount of range. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not seen it. I couldn't. there's a couple of moments in this where he's required to be dramatic. It's the two death scenes, if you will, the death of his father, and then we'll get to the death of another character at the end, and he has to display great anguish and torment at these deaths, but it doesn't quite get there for me. And I think, over the piece of the 3 films he played Superman in, I think he was a great Superman. I really do, and I think he was perfect for the role. In many ways, it's a shame he didn't get to do more, and that's a whole other story as to how and why that never came to fruition, and blah blah blah. It's been debated to death. But I think he was a very good Superman, very very good. I just think he's not, in terms of what Reeve brought to the role. There's no dichotomy between his Clark Kent and his Superman. They're exactly the same, just one's wearing glasses, one isn't.
Yeah.
Although granted, in this film, he doesn't adopt the quote-unquote Clark Kent persona until the very last scene of the film.
Yeah.
But
even then,
when we talk about the sequel to this film, where he is Clark Kent, roving reporter, he doesn't act or sound any different.
No.
Which doesn't help you to suspend the disbelief that no one would go, that's Superman.
Yeah.
But with Reeve, there was that completely different character that he played when he was Clark as to when he was Superman. Everything, the way he held himself, the way he talked, etc., which I know you've talked about in your other shows. So yeah, again, I don't want to shit on Henry Cavill. I am a Henry Cavill fan. I think he was excellent in it, and I think he's been good in other films. I just don't think he is the greatest actor in the world.
Yeah.
But I think for what's required of him in this film, I think he's fine. I think he does what it says on the tin. What do you think about him?
No, he's an interesting actor, and I think, like you say, he's done films where I think he's been all right. And I think he's a better actor now than he was when he did this.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
He's improved over the years, and I think with with roles that have sort of challenged him and stuff. I mean, if you've ever seen before this, there's a film called The Immortals.
Oh yeah, with Mickey Rourke as the yeah. I remember seeing that at the cinema.
Yeah, and it was like one of the first big 3D films that sort of came off the back of 300 and stuff, and it was that sort of stylized vision. And he's kind of terrible in that.
To be fair,
it's not a great film, but he's really sort of like weirdly miscast and kind of sort of confused in it. It's not a good film. But so he feels more comfortable in this, but you can sort of see, I'd describe his performance as light, in that he does everything that's sort of asked of him. Like they're like, right, you're going to hold up this burning oil rig, shout, and he goes, "Argh!" And you go, thank you very much. Like do this, run across this thing and grab these clothes, with your bare chest out. Well, do it. And you go, cool. And so it's always sort of like meets the requirements of the scene, but never quite do I feel like there's depth to that character. And the two, you talk about the 2 death scenes, but there's 2 other scenes that kind of stand out to me as sort of where I feel this challenge of range and sort of the ability to emote is when he first comes back to see Martha. And he's like, I found them. I found my parents. I found my people.
Yes.
And he's given this sort of like mini speech. And she, Diane Lane's experienced actress. Like she's given sort of like, a good performance. She's like, oh, that's amazing. And for him, it kind of feels a little bit light. Like he's delivering the words and it's kind of fine. But I don't feel like there's a sort of what's the emotion here? Like there should be some, clearly there must be like some confusion. Like this is the mum, this is the woman that raised you, and you're referring to other people as your parents and your people. Like there should be like a mix of emotions here. Like this should be kind of difficult to sort of convey and stuff. Doesn't feel like he mainly feels like he's coming back and going like, I found that pen I dropped this morning. You go, oh, it's amazing, it's wonderful. Like it could be. Do you know what I mean? It feels.
Yeah. It's very one note, isn't it?
Yeah. And I feel the sort of same thing about a similar scene that comes later is when he has the conversation with Lois Lane in the graveyard. It's just this kind of midsection when she sort of tracks him down, and and he's sort of like, trying to keep his face hidden a little bit, and she sort of like, starts suddenly acting like bombarding with questions, and he's like, well, maybe I don't want my story told and all this other stuff. Like, there's no kind of depth. It never feels like there's a depth of emotion or purpose to these sort of scenes. They're delivered fine and they're not terrible, but like I feel, that this just sort of goes to show. I think, but I think, as you say, I think when we watch the next two films, there are scenes where you go like, oh, he's gotten better at this. Like he's able to do a bit more. But at this point, I think it's light on the emoting.
Yeah, I agree. And it must have been a huge undertaking for him, because I suppose it's what they've done with all the movie Supermen. They've always cast a relative unknown to play the part. Reeve, Brandon Routh, Cavill, even now David Corenswet. Who had heard of David Corenswet before Superman? Bits here, bits there. He was obviously had a part in Twisters and whatnot. But again, not a star. Obviously, he's about to be, but not a star at the time, which is what they've always done. Which I think is good, because it helps you to suspend your disbelief in the character.
It's the same as
what
the Bond
that character
thing,
can
isn't it?
do.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Bond thing, isn't it? Sort of like,
Yeah, the character is the star,
exactly,
not the actor.
Perfectly.
It's the same. It's the same in Marvel as well. You don't need to cast A-list actors in the MCU because the character is the star. I mean, Robert Downey Jr., people can remember that far back before Iron Man, he wasn't an A-list star.
No,
Iron Man made him into one.
Exactly.
Likewise, Chris Evans. So you don't need to be a major star to play.
No.
I think it helps if you're not, actually, because then people can buy you more as this fantastical character. So yeah, it must have been a huge thing for someone at that age, whatever he was, about 30 years old at that age. Obviously, been in some stuff, but wasn't a huge star. And then overnight, you're in this
massive blockbuster.
One of the biggest parts that you can get in film is obviously Superman. So it must have been a huge thing to do. And you admire his dedication to the role, the physical.
Oh, absolutely.
Regimen that he must have gone. You look at pictures of him in his screen test, and he's in better shape than I could ever dream of being. But compared to how he is compared to how he is in the film, though, he's incredible, almost gaunt. He's skinny and he's in shape, but he's not jacked.
Hench.
Hench, which is what he is in the film. So that you have to admire the physical dedication that he put into the role, and obviously took the role very seriously and carried himself very well, I think, for all the interviews he did. And he obviously realized what the part meant to people, and has always been very dignified about it, I think, even in the light of his, what some would say, shitty treatment by Warner Brothers with the whole Black Adam thing, and then saying I'm back, and then they go, absolutely, mate, you're not back.
Yeah,
we're moving on. Again, had a dignity and grace about him. I think he's a very likable guy. And yeah, like you said, you summed it up perfectly. He does everything that he has to do. There just could have been a bit more on top of it. But again, that's asking for more. It's not saying he doesn't do everything you need. I think he was a very good Superman.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's just there's deep emotional beats are needed. He kind of sort of, I wouldn't even say he misses the mark. He kind of he hits it, but like he sort of taps it rather than hitting it. But you're right. I think from everything I know and everything I've seen since, like, he seems like a genuinely nice guy. Seems very down to earth and grounded about how he takes these things on. So fair play to him. But and when it comes to the physicality, and when he comes to sort of having the thing I would say the opposite of that is when he has to talk in that gentle tone, or he does to sort of like he's sort of talking to people and to other bits. That sort of dignity comes through. That natural dignity he has kind of comes through, I think. So when he does talk to Lois Lane, or even when he's sort of talking to the sort of the soldiers or the army guys and stuff, like it's kind of, there is a kind of like, I could do whatever I want, but I'm not. Like there's a dignity to it. So he definitely carries himself in a way that I like. And beyond this, he sort of does give himself up to Zod, as does Amy Adams, and we get the sort of the scene on the ship where he is acclimatizing to Kryptonian atmosphere, which is making him weaker. for the simple reasons they want to be able to take a sample of his blood so they can prove that he is the Codex, that the skull thing is gone. And then Lois Lane's able to use the Kryptonian key, and meets Jor-El, and he helps her escape. I kind of like that scene where he's helping her escape, and he's like, to the left, fire up, and then like move your head to the right, and someone tries to punch her and stuff. Like,
oh, it's really cool with the music as well. I think that's a really well put together scene. The way he's opening the doors for her, closing the doors. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, I can see that, like, Russell Crowe's like, I don't really have to do a great deal in these scenes, so like, I'm just gonna again have that sort of poise, and I'm clearly having quite a bit of fun doing it. I think, like,
Yeah, I think he's very good in it, Russell Crowe.
I do as well.
I think he's a very good Jor-El, actually.
Yeah, he's another one of these actors that I think by this point he'd sort of, when he wants to, and he sort of can keep his poise and stuff. He has a gravitas that I think works for these kinds of roles, where he can be that sort of mentoring kind of father figure.
Yeah, like in Craven the Hunter.
I've not seen that.
You must at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's for what it's currently down to rent for $1.99 on Prime, so I am tempted.
Cheap at twice the price.
Yeah. But yeah, I like him as Jor-El. I think I agree. I think he's very good in this. But this comes to that conversation, doesn't it? As you say, sort of like, Clark / Superman's able to break out of his bonds and stuff, and Jor-El is there for like one final conversation.
Yeah.
Where he basically is like, punch your way out, and in doing so the sun is there, and he's sort of able to sort of rejuvenate a little bit from the what's being trapped in the Kryptonian atmosphere. He holds his arms up in a Christ-like pose, and Jor-El says, go save. And he does. So all that sort of is good. I've got to say, this is the last point really in the film where I'm going like, there's some cringy moments, but generally it's really good. This then kicks into action mode for the next almost 50 minutes.
It's non-stop, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd forgotten how relentless this 50-minute action sequence is.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on this sort of climax and stuff?
I think the action is impressively done. I think, like we were saying at the top of the show, was the first time we got to see Superman do genuine super fights due to the technology and them actually bothering to give him someone to fight, which they didn't do in Superman Returns. So it's a thrill to see Kryptonian on Kryptonian action. The speed they move at, the things that's brilliant. The things they're able to do. It's brilliant. I mean, I suppose the thing that people have a problem with in this film is the wanton destruction that comes with these fights. And seemingly very little regard for human life and safety. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, that's not Superman. He wouldn't do such a thing. Like when he goes to save his mother and he starts, punching Zod in the face, going, "You dare threaten my mother!" and he throws, he drives him through those chimney stacks and into a petrol station in Smallville. And people are like, well, why would he do that? Why would he not keep the fight where it is in farmland where there's no one around? But people forget this is a Superman that's been Superman for a day or something. Has only just learned he can fly, for God's sake, has never had to have a super fight with someone at all, let alone someone who's literally got all his powers and is, a better, like he says at the end, I'm warrior, bred for this. Where did you train on farm? So, these are people who, like you said, they've been on Earth for hours, yet they can do everything that he can do and probably better. It's only the fact that he's been on Earth for 30 years that his I guess his strength is probably more than theirs, and his ability to adapt because he's got used to it and he's drunk in the sun's rays for 30 years as opposed to 30 minutes. So I think the action is, yes, so I'm going off point here. I think the action is fantastic. I think it's really well put together. It's spectacular. I guess it's what would happen if two or in the Smallville fight 3 superpowered beings collided. It's just, yeah, I get people's thing about this notion that it's just destruction porn or whatever you want to call it, and it's, you know, they address it in the second film, don't they? The start of the second film very much addresses the fallout from that fight in Metropolis with Zod. You know, we see it from the ground level when Bruce Wayne's there, and the actual human effect of said fight, and then the after effects of that. So it is dealt with. I think people, when looking at Man of Steel in isolation, think, Jesus Christ, it's just, you know, it's like a PlayStation fight or something. But as a visual thrill and as a spectacle, I think it's great action. You know, there's no other way to describe it. Are you a fan of it, or do you think it's too much? Or
no, I kind of, having watched it the other night, I realised how relentless it was. I think that was the thing when I'm going, visually impressive. And I agree that, like, especially the speed, like, you know, Furio in particular, like, she's skilled and she's sort of like sliding around the floor and doing stuff, and she's sort of like, you know, jumping out the way.
She's a great character, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
She doesn't have much to do in the film, but when she does it, proper,
she's excellent,
evil woman. Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, more than sort of like the non sort of standing that they've got. But yeah, no, I think it's fine and it works. It feels. This is the way it would happen. I mean, you know, I'm a fan of Miracle Man, and sort of like, you know,
yes.
and I think I've sort of said this before, that like Alan Moore addressed this when at the end of his first sort of his work, where there is a super fight at the end of that, and it like decimates centre of London, and even the hero in that point is like in the heat of battle, like Miracle Man grabs a car to level Kid Miracle Man. And it sort of says, it says, like, you know, Miracle Man grabs his car, not realizing there's a family of 4 in it as he starts smashing it into someone. And you're like, yeah, like that, the heat of battle, you know, that's just the destruction that would happen. And so I kind of accept it in Smallville. That's the point where I'm like, you know, it's a small town, it's a small place, it's going to have these kind of explosions. There should be more effort. The thing is, I would say there should be more effort or more concern on Superman's face, on sort of like, you know, Clark should be looking at this and going like, this is my hometown. I've got to get people like what again, I realized it watching this. I'm like, oh, this is his hometown. He's on home turf. But at no point does that become an advantage. Do you know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh, that should really become an advantage of sort of like, oh, I know this about this town. Like, I can use this to my advantage to sort of like, no, we're just going to go to Main Street and blow the crap out of everything. It feels like it's impressive, but feels like it looks impressive, but lacks imagination. When I'm like, you know, there should be something more than that. Like, he throws Non at one point, and you realise he's thrown him into the train yards.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, cool, did you mean to do that? Or was it just happenstance? Like, you know this town. Like, surely you should be like, oh, that's where I'll go. And I can, like, level him with some diesel trains or something. Like, I don't know. It feels like there should be some more imagination in that fight. But it does look great. I think it looks great.
Yeah. Oh, it does. Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. It's like he's just a blunt weapon, isn't he? Really. There's
this point,
there's no nuance to the fight. You know, it's not like Superman 2 where he uses his brain and thinks, you know, I'll take them somewhere. Well, I'll have the advantage.
Yeah.
So there's none of that. But again, this is a young. So he's been Superman for a day. You know, he doesn't have that mindset and that mastery and that confidence. You know, so I guess it kind of plays into that. But I like the way the military are involved in that Smallville fight as well. It gives it more of a real world flavor because the military would get involved, you know. That's like one of the things, you know, that's what you'd expect. They wouldn't just allow these super powered alien beings to just have it out in the middle of the street, they'd be in there trying to take everyone out.
Well, it's kind of called out, isn't it? Because at one point they're in the street, and one of the soldiers, you hear it over the radio. One says, "But what about the guy in blue?" And I forget his rank, but like the colonel sort of says, "All of them." Like, you know, which is kind of laying the groundwork for Batman v Superman. Like Batman takes that similar stance, which, and I know people have gone like, you know, "Oh, whatever about that." Kind of still makes sense to me. Where I'm like, no, like if there's a superpowered being that could attract more superpowered beings, and they can level a city, I'm going to be a bit wary about this.
Exactly. And they've known of Superman for a few hours.
Yeah.
From that time of him giving himself up to the army, to being taken to Zod's ship, to this moment.
Yeah.
So they don't know for sure who he is and what makes him tick. So of course they're going to just go, right, just put them all down, you know, just get rid of them all.
Well,
it's only when he starts saving the military that they go, oh, actually, he's a good man, he's on our side. And then he has that line, doesn't he, where he says, this man is not our enemy. And there's that realization finally that he's, you know.
And he stops the fight to save a pilot, and he does it a couple of other things as well. So yeah, I'm down with that. No, I think it kind of works, but I just wish it was a little bit more imaginative on the fight side. But I think it kind of works for the most part. It then shifts to this whole thing with the world engine.
Yes.
Which again, the more I think about it, the sillier it becomes. Because he's like, oh, we want this to be like Krypton. And I'm going, why? Krypton looked like a barren shithole. Like this, just enjoy the planet. Like you can breathe, you know, you can see that Kryptonians can breathe here and actually excel here. I don't know why you're trying to terraform this planet. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's he should see the bigger picture a bit, Zod, I think, before he goes down that path. But I suppose he has to make him the villain of the film, doesn't he? I suppose.
But then you have obviously, so Supes flies down to India to take, or the Indian Ocean to take on the other one that's down there. And in the meantime, in Metropolis, like, it's flattening the city, and we get to see sort of like, you know, people from the Daily Planet, you know, looking out and stuff. And again, I like all this. The fact that it does cut, it's not just, you know, we're not just going to see Superman's fight, and we're not just going to see the military engagement, which is good. I like the fact again that the military stay involved. And stuff, because I always feel this with like the Avengers or other things where I'm like, why are you relying on like 6 dudes, you know, to do this? Like, surely there should be like absolutely hundreds of soldiers being sort of like pumped into this as well. Like,
Exactly.
This makes no sense.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
So I do appreciate that there is that thing of like, no, the army's involved. This makes complete sense. So I like the fact that there's 2 separate battles, and there's a plan as well. There's an absolute plan where like, Superman's going to say, look, I was brought here in this. It has the technology. You can, we can then use it for the Phantom Drive. Blah blah blah. All good stuff. I'm quite comfortable with that. And I also like that it gives you those people on the ground, so you get to see sort of like Perry White and the staff from the and they get trapped and I like the effect. Everything gets pulled up and then smashed down and stuff. Now, all this debris in there.
It just gets wider and wider, doesn't it? It's destroying everything's path. Yeah, it's very cool, actually. Yeah.
So again, like all this, I'm actually watching and going like, it's a bit relentless. Like, I'm still sort of like going, there's a lot coming into my eyes at this point, but it's generally working for me. I'm going, yeah, all right, cool. In fact, the one part, the part that's working the least for me at this point is probably Superman in the Indian Ocean, taking on the other end of the world engine, and it's sort of like zappy arms and then trying to fly up into the beam and all this other stuff. That's kind of like the least interesting. Everything else, I think, in Metropolis is more interesting for me.
Yeah, it's very cool, actually. It again is like a practical element to it as to what the military would do, and the theory behind the technology is pretty sound as well. You know, I guess as far-fetched as it is, it does, there is a practical element to it. They're not just going to roll up with a nuke and just try and nuke the machine like they're going to do at the end of the Avengers, like you were saying. When they think those 6 people have not got the advantage anymore, they just send a nuke into New York City, don't they?
Yeah.
Before it gets disposed of, obviously. But so I like that. I like there's actually a plan and a strategy to it. And it's cool that the sense of stakes are real. It's essentially a suicide mission as well. They don't know they're coming back, and it actually does. Because they can't drop the payload, I guess it does turn out to be a suicide mission. And it's I like the Colonel in it as well. I think his payoff as well, because when he's on Metropolis and Fiora is about to kill him, and she says a good death is its own reward in a very smug way before Superman throws her out the way. But the fact that he's able to give it to her back in her face, like, I've got you here, you're done. I'm done too, but at least I'm going to take you down with me. And it's very cool payoff. Good for you, because she's off. She deserves it.
Yeah, and she's a great villain. I have to say, she's on the back of that plane when they're shooting at her, and she's just walking at them and just sort of ripping through the metal. She's very good, very cool. Yeah, Christopher Maloney is Colonel Nathan Hardy. Is the guy, and I like him. He's another actor that's sort of I've seen him in bits and pieces. I think he's been on Law and Order for or something like that for Forever and a Day. Never really seen it, but have you ever seen? Did you ever watch Happy?
Is that the one with the weird computer what was it, like a thing?
A flying
thing.
A flying blue unicorn.
That's it. Yeah. No, I didn't see it. I know of it. Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, there. But
he's brilliant in it. He's absolutely brilliant in it.
He is a good actor. He's a very good actor. He was in Oz. Do you remember? Did you ever watch Oz?
Yes.
He was one of the main guys in that. He played a proper psychopath in that. He was like a serial killer, but he had a soft side to him. He had quite a touching relationship with one of the other inmates in there before it all went south. He's a good screen presence, Christopher Maloney. Actually. I think he does a lot with the part he's given.
Yes.
His sort of death line, his death scene, it's a very cool way to go out. I do like that a lot.
Yeah. So and so that brings everything to a bit of a climax, doesn't it? Sort of the world engine's been beaten, the military, the ship has then been used with all the sort of the Kryptonians on has been destroyed and sucked into the Phantom Zone, so they're gone. And so it leaves Superman, it leaves Kal and Zod as the only two left.
Yeah. Cue the carnage.
and then sort of you go oh my god, this is going to be a tense moment, and you don't get a tense moment. You kind of go straight into an ass kicking for the next sort of 10 minutes, and again, it's just that relentlessness sort of keeps going. But again, there are certain moments in this that some work better than others.
It looks great, doesn't it? Again, it's like you were saying about the Smallville fight. As a feat of CGI action, superhero, spectacular smackdown, it looks fantastic. It's, again, just people don't like the fact that they're just seemingly wantonly going through built. Well, obviously you can understand Zod doing it because he's now hell-bent on destroying the human race, because his people are gone and his hopes have died. Now he's the last Kryptonian apart from obviously Kal-El. So you can understand him, but the fact that Superman seemingly is not trying to avoid destroying buildings and what have you, people have a problem with that, I guess, and I can understand it. But as a piece of action, it's second to none. It really is spectacular. It's probably the best, up to that point anyway, the best Superman on screen fight we'd ever seen, I guess. Because we'd never had the technology to do it, and then or the budget in some cases. I think as a piece of action, it's great, and it's a fitting climax, I think. And obviously, people have a very big problem with the resolution of said fight.
Just on that thing, one of the points I want to make about this destruction is because it's Superman, He's kind of held to this higher level, isn't it? That's this idea. And so I accept that actually, like you say, he's only just become Superman. We've seen he's still kind of human in that sense of like he's petty or he gets annoyed and stuff, and he doesn't always think things through. That will come like a little bit later and stuff. So I'm kind of fine with to an extent. But it is this thing of like the fight starts in this massive area of like flattened stuff and rubble when you have sort of like, Zod sort of says like, look what is left of like, what could have been Krypton. So I'm going like, cool. What you've actually got then is like a big boxing ring.
Exactly. Yeah. Keep
Like,
it there. Yeah.
Keep it there. Like that's what this should have been like but I would say the scene where he starts ripping his armor off and obviously reveals the black sort of like Zod suit underneath, and he's sort of able to sort of fly, and you get this realization that he's actually like he's able to adapt faster than Clark has been able to. I like that, but it still feels a little bit excessive, and it's that relentlessness. And again, it looks great. You are right. I absolutely agree. There are certain bits that are great, but if that had been like on its own, I think I'd be fine with it. But the fact that I've gone through like half an hour of fighting already, that I'm already like, I need to go for a pee. I need a break. I need to do something because like this is just pummeling me like visually a bit too much.
Yeah, it does seem like it's never going to end at one point. I mean, they even go into outer space at one point, don't they? And fight on a Wayne Enterprises satellite, which is a wonderful Easter egg with the Wayne logo on there. Just shows that Batman exists in this world, and that's what's coming in the future. But yeah, there's no light and shade to the fight. It is literally boom, 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 boom. And when you get punched, you don't fall to the ground. You get punched and you go through 5 buildings before you stop. So yes, it's overkill, but at the same time, it has to be big. It has to be a big fight between these two. I guess that's what would happen. But then that ending, obviously, a lot of people have a problem with that because, people say Superman shall never kill, will never kill, can never kill. Yet, obviously, that's the way the fight ends. It's an interesting one. Are you in that camp as like, oh, I hate that, you shouldn't have done that? Or
no, I mean, again, it's kind of like this purist view of. Now, I believe Batman should never kill. I think there's a difference between this in certain situations, and this is maybe it's sort of a bit hypocritical, but like Batman's a different case. Batman's sort of like a non-powered, superpowered being, right? So if he kills someone, like he's made a choice. And I believe that like if Superman killed humans, or if every sort of like villain was sort of like to be popped off, then I think I'd have a bit of a problem. But I don't remember many people having a problem with like in 1989 or 1992 when Batman. I mean, in Batman Returns, Batman attaches some dynamite to some clown's belt and pushes him into a basement to be blown up. I mean, get over yourself. It's like no, it's fine. I mean, but the fact he does, it's more of a like, this isn't super intelligent, super sort of like, this isn't the sort of the Grant Morrison or the Silver Age Superman that's got all that science. This is a guy that's like, up until yesterday, was trying to do his best by holding up burning oil rigs and protecting women from arseholes. Like, he's now on this global defense level, and he's like that. He's been fighting for hours, and like it's just sort of like, I've got to bring an end to this. So no, I think he even says like, don't don't. He doesn't want to do it, but I just think he gets to a point where he's like, I have no choice, and so
well, that's just it. He has no choice, does he? Because what else actually could he do? People go, oh, when he's got him in that headlock and Zod's like about to fry that family against a wall in the train station, all Superman needed to do was just keep hold of him and fly upwards. Then he can't pound the family. Okay, fine, but then what? What? Because there's nothing else he can do to stop him. And Zod even says at the fight, this only ends one way. Either you die or I die. That's what he says to him. And there's literally no way of stopping him. At this point in the story, no one has heard of kryptonite. No one knows that's even out there and that can nullify them. So no one, that's not in play. No one actually knows anything about Kryptonians until like the day before. So no one knows about potentially building a Red Sun prison to throw him into. So there's no prison. Even if Superman knocked him out, there's no way you could put him that he wouldn't be able to just break out of. That's not going to happen. So what else? You can't put him in the Phantom Zone because that's now been destroyed, so that's no longer an option. So what actually else is there that you could do with him? There's literally nothing. If you threw him into the sun, he'd probably survive and probably come out even more juiced up because that's where you get the power from. So I don't understand what else he was supposed to do. I don't know. And I did read somewhere in the original draft was that Zod would get sucked into the Phantom Zone as well, but they decided that wasn't really a worthy climax and they needed something bigger. But I just don't understand what other potential option there was for the character other than to kill him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is one of those things of I've had this in the past where I've gone like, oh, it's a cop out, it's a cheap ending. I think this kind of has to happen because. But I think this is where I think Cavill's performance kind of lets it down. This is that thing of like great intentions, not stellar execution. What you've got to remember is like that time in the wilderness, like, is because he's struggling because he's like, like he still loves his parents and stuff, but he's not human. So he's trying to find his place. Like, who am I? What am I in this world? Like, what, to then find out he's got Kryptonian heritage and he's sort of like able to speak to his original, his birth father and all this other stuff, like, to speak to Jor-El, and then to actually meet other Kryptonians, only to be like in opposition to them. Like all of this should be like, look, you in a matter of days, like you find your heritage. You learn about your heritage, and all of a sudden that heritage is coming to give you a smack. This thing at the end should be like, I have completely decimated my own connection with my heritage. My spaceship, the craft that brought him here is gone. The technology that allowed him to speak with his father is gone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Zod wipes it out, doesn't he?
Yeah, so that's gone.
Yeah.
So he can't speak to his father, and then Clark makes the choice, his own sacrifice, to send them into the Phantom Zone and stuff and then it's just him and Zod. So he's sort of like had to crush it down. So there should be like more emphasis on the fact of like the sacrifice that he's making is really difficult. Like this is really difficult for him. They give that sort of like he falls to his knees and goes at the end, but it's kind of like a little bit. It's too little, too late. There needs to be more, and I think so. Like the joy of him finding his parents, his biological heritage, when he speaks to Martha Kent, should be higher. Like should be excitement. There should be like a real sort of like so that when they feel like there's this pull down of all this should really not feel like a victory. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, he's won, but at what cost? Like this, and you should really understand that this has taken a real toll on Clark and stuff. So I think it's I think it works, but I think more could have been done for it to make it feel like a real sacrifice of him doing this is actually like the damaging him as much as sort of just killing Zod.
Yeah, because by killing Zod, he truly becomes the last son of Krypton. Now, obviously, we know about Supergirl and blah, 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 but in this canon, in this continuity, not in what we're going to get soon with Guns, we know with Supergirl's in that continuity. But in this, there was no Supergirl, unless there was going to be plans to bring her in at a later date. We never got that far. But to his knowledge, at least, once he snapped Zod's neck, he's truly alone. Truly alone. There's no other Kryptonians alive. He is the last son of Krypton in inverted commas.
Yeah.
So again, that's it's him finally severing every last connection to his origin and fully becoming a man of Earth, so to speak. So yeah, I know what you mean. There should have been more drama with it. Perhaps
Yeah.
a bit more nuance, other than, you know, punch, 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 punch. As great as that looks, I don't want to take away from what a amazing feat of action cinema that whole sequence is, and it's superb. But I know I fully agree with what you're saying, Scott. It should have had a bit more to it. How you execute that, I'm not too sure. But this should have been something in there where it's really weighing heavily on his shoulders. And you don't see aftermath either, do you? Literally, he lets out that cry. Lois turns up and gives him a hug, blah blah blah. And then the very next scene is when he goes and meets with the military in the desert and says, "Look, you know, I'm here to help. You're gonna have to trust me. Don't keep following me with satellites, because you're not going to find out where I'm going anyway. I'm here to help." You know.
Yeah.
But so there's no, how long's passed between that, him doing that with Zod, and that? Is it a week?
Yeah.
Is it the next day? Is it a month? You know, let's see a bit of introspection. Let's see him mourning Zod's death, as bizarre as it sounds. I mean, he killed him. He deserved it, and he had to do it. But show him, you know, that way.
And this is that thing of like, I recently watched Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
For Stories That Time and Space. And in that, it was sort of one of the discussion points was the turning of Vader. Like, you know, is it too soon? Is it too quick? How does it work?
Yeah.
But in that, one of the things that sort of like, I feel backs that up is the continual conversation that's happening between Luke and Vader. And Luke's going like, you know, well, I can sense some good in you. And Vader's going like, "Yeah, fuck off, leave me alone."
Yeah.
Like, but you get that ongoing sort of like, you know, they have almost like a discussion, and then they have the fight, and even during the fight, there's kinds of moments of that sort of thing. It should be that there should be this sort of debate of going like, here's an alternative. Like, you haven't got to destroy this planet. Like, you know, Clark should be sort of saying, like, here's the alternative. Don't destroy this planet. We can become the defenders of this planet. Like, your skills as a warrior can be put to great use here. Look at the technology we can bring to this planet. We could do this. Like, you know, that's what I would like to see. It's like, have that debate, and then for Zod to be going like, I am Kryptonian, and I only want to. My job is to save Krypton, not Earth. Like, there needs to be, but like, yeah, I'd want to see that discussion, or that, you know, during the fight somehow.
Yeah, him trying to offer that middle ground, that halfway house between you're going to murder, you're going to kill everyone, or let's try and work it out somehow, and him just steadfastly throwing it back in his face. And then you go to, I've got no choice here.
Yeah.
Snap your neck, you're dead. I know what you mean. Yeah, that would have worked a lot better, definitely. Yeah.
So we do get to the end, and, you know, I understand why this is controversial. I also agree with what you're saying. I'd love to see some grief, some introspection that comes after this, because it does feel a bit too light again when they're like, you know, he pulls down the drone, and then sort of like, you know, he's like, I love the fact he says, "Don't try and find me. By the way, I grew up in Kansas." And you're like, what? No, that's just stupid. So I appreciate that. That's all fine. That's very Superman-y. I love the fact that the Captain Faris, the woman, kind of giggly and sort of says, you know, he's kind of hot, and you know, they're introducing a little bit of humor again. We then get this sort of like little end section of, they're going to introduce Clark Kent. Like, he goes home, he sees Martha, and says, "I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get a job where I can keep my ear to the ground, and people aren't going to worry about me going off to someplace dangerous, because I spotted that Lois Lane just went around the world spending money on travel without anybody asking any questions. I want to do that."
Yeah.
So somehow, again, I'm not going to ask questions because it happens every time. This person with no qualifications in writing or journalism or any previous experience goes and joins a major newspaper.
Yeah, if you thought the Kryptonian stuff was stretching disbelief, that really does take it to another level. Yeah.
But he does. He turns up. He rides on his bike. And he turns up, and he gets in the lift, and you see him put his glasses on in the lift, and he steps out, and Superman steps out wearing glasses and a coat. I mean, that's literally what we get.
Yeah, and then cut to black. Yeah. It's nice. You finally see him adopt the Clark Kent persona and set that up for future installments. It's it's a nice ending, I suppose. It just shows that he's ready to move forward into the character that we expect him to be.
Yeah.
Whether he did or not, we'll see in the next film. But
No.
yeah, I don't have a problem with the ending. I think it's quite a nice, like you said, apart from ridiculousness of him getting a job. I mean,
Yeah.
what did he do? Email some articles to Perry White and go, "I'm quite good at writing, me. Any jobs going?"
Yeah.
Although maybe they lost a lot of, maybe in the end scene, a lot of Planet staff were killed, so they're taking on.
He's taken full advantage of the destruction that he shed onto the city.
Exactly. There's jobs going. There's positions need to be filled. So
Yeah,
where there's opportunity, you got to strike.
that's true.
But so yeah, it's fine. It's a nice little coda to the scene, rather than some post-credit scene that introduces the next villain or introduces Batman or something like that.
No, I agree.
You could save that for the next film. Just because it's a very self-contained film, actually. Other than the Wayne Enterprises logo on the satellite, there's no real references to the wider DC universe, is there? Anything like that?
And I appreciate it for that. That is something in this day and age. Even then, I greatly appreciate that it didn't try and do anything more than that. It's just a Superman film, and so that part of it, I think, works. Yeah. We basically see Superman in glasses and a sports coat at the end, meet Lois Lane, and she says, "Welcome to the planet." Nice little play on words. And then, it goes to black. So, but yeah, I think this is it's a film that, for me, as an overall piece, is I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah.
But there's still those niggles where I'm like, there was almost something phenomenal in here. But that's often the case.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts then on Man of Steel?
I think Man of Steel is a good film. I think it's a good film. I remember thoroughly enjoying it on first viewing back in 2013, and watching it again the other day, obviously to prepare to have a chat with you about it. It's the first time I'd watched it from top to bottom for a few years. Probably it's been a long while since I've watched it, other than watching bits here and bits there when it's been on TV. So obviously to watch it again with a fresh pair of eyes, you do spot the things that you wish were different. But I think overall it's a very solid Superman film. I get the things that people have a problem with and what have you, but again, it's also it's art, it's all subjective. You're never going to please everybody. But I think overall, I think it's very good. I'm quite grateful that in this film, Snyder doesn't default too much to his signature slow-mo style. I don't think there's any, is there?
Barely any. Yeah.
I think he must have sort of developed that fetish a bit later.
He was saving it all up for Rebel Moon, because
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You make a 3-hour film out of 1.5 hours of material by just putting it in slow motion.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think if I was to score it, I would probably give it probably 7.5 to 8 out of 10. I really do think. I think the cast is pretty good. I think they've wisely cast who was then an unknown as Superman and surrounded him with good actors, like they did in the 78 film with Reeve, and surrounded him with good solid actors. So I think that's good. I think Snyder's direction's pretty good. The action obviously is unlike anything we'd seen before for Superman. So for that, I appreciate it. I think you hit it perfectly on the head there. I think it just falls short of being what it could have been.
Yeah.
But I think it has to be judged as a success. I mean, it made 3 times its budget at the box office. It made enough for them to proceed with the bigger plans they had for the DCEU or the Snyderverse, whatever you want to call it. And that's well documented about them there. But I think as a starting point for this conceived universe, I think it's a very solid opening. I really do. I think it's a good film, Scott. I do.
No, I agree. I think I'm probably not as effusive as yourself. I think I'll more give it like a 6.5 or 7.
Yeah.
But it's like, and I think it's more because there are niggles that I sort of I think I just nitpick over that sort of get under my skin a little bit. But you're right. As I went into it, visually, this is stunning. There are scenes in this that are phenomenally well shot. and I think that is Snyder's stock in trade. Like the guy can frame a shot and he can sort of set it up. He's a phenomenal cinematographer. I think the cast were good. I think Cavill is a. I like the fact that they've taken that step forward, and Cavill's a different choice to sort of Ralph or Reeve. I do. No, I think he still seems green and a little bit overwhelmed by what he's having to do. And I think that is rectified over time, but I still think he's good in the moments when it's when he is Superman, he carries it well, and looks the part. And the majority of the casts are okay. I still have my most issues are with Amy Adams as Lois Lane. I think she's sort of the one of the weaker parts of it. More because she's not a bad actress. She just doesn't have that essence of character that I think is needed. But other than that, I think you're right. I think Michael Shannon is my favourite thing in this film.
He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. He sort of carries, he's just enough arch. There's just enough camp in it to be a good villain. And despite his plan being a little weird, I kind of can justify it all because of who he is and how they've set him up. So, yeah, I think Michael Shannon is the MVP of this film.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, it's a good film, and we shall move on. From here, we'll go from Man of Steel, and the next one we will do the Ultimate Edition of Batman v Superman, and as you said, the aftermath of this film, and how that sort of rests. So we'll get to that. But before we get to that, Max, where can people find you and sort of find out what you're up to?
People can find me on Twitter or X, whatever the hell it's called these days, at Maxi Byrne, which is MAXYBYRNE. You can find me on there. There's links to the various websites I write bits and pieces for on there, so you can check those out. More specifically, darkknightnews.com. Or you can tap into the Comics in Motion feed, which is on all podcast catching apps, where we do a music show where we discuss classic albums from top to bottom. That's always a fun time. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, go check them out. They are good. Especially everything Comics in Motion is fantastic. But yeah, no, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to sort of check out what we're doing, check out all the rest of this Superman retrospective. We have gone back and we're doing all kinds of things now, leading up to the new Superman film, as well as many of the retrospectives on 20th Century Geek, or on Stories Out of Time and Space, the sister podcast, and our Patreon. Go check out the Patreon for much more content and fun and games over there. So yeah, thank you for listening along. And Max, thank you very much for joining me to talk about Man of Steel. Been great fun.
Thanks so much for having me on. I've loved it. Thank you.
No, we're just starting, mate. We're just starting.
We've only just begun.
That's it. We'll get through it all. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we shall see you on the next episode.